Thank you so much. Hello, everyone. Good morning. It's great to be here. My name is Benjamin Toff. I am an associate professor just across the river at the Hubbard School of Journalism and Mass Communication here at the U. I'm also the director of the Minnesota Journalism Center, which is an outreach and engagement and research hub within the School of Journalism to support the local news ecosystem in Minnesota more broadly. And it's my absolute pleasure and honor to introduce our first speaker this morning, Hannah Poferl. Hannah is Assistant Managing Editor, Chief Data Officer, and Head of Audience at the New York Times. Since she's been leading the audience team in 2019, she has grown both staffing and its expertise, driving industry-leading performance on social media, search, and editorial analytics. Since becoming the company's first chief data officer in 2021, she has occupied a unique senior leadership role that spans both news and business, with executive oversight of audience and data strategies, the cross-company data and insights team, and international growth efforts. Hannah is also originally from Minnesota, so it is really wonderful to have her here at the University of Minnesota today. Please join us, Hannah.
Hi, everyone. Thank you so much. And Dr. Toff, thank you so much for inviting me to speak today. You just heard a pretty big mouthful when my title was given for the New York Times. And I thought I would explain it a little bit because it's relevant to some of the things that I'll talk about later on. So I hold a dual role at the New York Times that bridges both the business side and the newsroom. I'm on the Times' newsroom leadership team. We call that the masthead of the Times. And from there, it's where I set audience strategy for the company, because you can't really plan an audience strategy and growth effort without doing it from the newsroom and with the perspective of the newsroom. So in that capacity, I identify opportunities to expand reach in ways that amplify the mission and collaborate closely with newsroom colleagues to bring those opportunities to life. And that serves actually my second role of Chief Data Officer. You can't really understand the Times as business without understanding the news cycle and without understanding audience. So a CDO kind of bridge editorial and business. And this you'll see again and again as a theme, even when I get into specific examples about AI, how the two come together, and how you need to find a perfect bridge. And this is the way I think about it, and by the way, how I also think about AI opportunities at the time. Whenever we're thinking about what to do next, how to seize an opportunity, when we think about demand, when we think about tools and AI tools, we're always trying to find where that opportunity overlaps with our editorial mission and vision. And we don't pursue things outside of that. That is to say, like the mission comes first, and we look for ways that these tools, we look for ways that opportunities amplify that mission, and we don't veer outside of it. And I think it's worked really well for the Times. We've been able to grow audience over years now and adapt to the changing environment, but it hasn't changed the core values of what we do. We haven't gone down paths that sometimes data can lead you to that wouldn't make sense. I have this deputy in the newsroom, Anna Devenko, and she often jokes, we could have a much bigger audience. I can tell you how to do that. We would add horoscopes to the New York Times, but that doesn't really meet in the middle of that Venn diagram, so it's not going to happen. But I think she keeps bringing it up because she really wants it to happen. But that's just how we evaluate things. And again, this theme will come up when I talk about how we are leveraging the opportunities that come with AI and advancements. And then just one other theme, and this is a theme for how my team works and I work, but just the newsroom works, and especially the AI initiatives team and the newsroom work. We really think of it as a blend of art and science. Our organization has, both in the newsroom and on the business side, data professionals of so many types, but we always have to emphasize the art. The science is helping us uncover opportunity, but seizing it takes the art. Okay, so that's enough intro. I'll get to the topic at hand. As as you probably all know, AI is transforming media and news in pretty profound ways. We're seeing already, and feel free, by the way, later to ask about this, since I'm studying it quite a bit, but we're seeing it shape consumer expectations really, really quickly. I don't know if anyone tuned into Google I/O a couple weeks ago where they make their major product announcements, but one of the data points that Sundar Pichai shared was that queries are getting longer because people can understand that the search engines and the AI tool set can understand nuance better than ever, better than they get from a simple keyword search. And that's just one of many ways people are expecting a very different information environment. So we're obviously seeing like this is just a really, really revolutionary moment. Most of this presentation is going to focus on a handful of case studies capturing how we're using AI and experimenting with a toolkit, and it's going to be optimistic. I'm personally really excited about what you're able to do in service of doing more journalism and producing more news. But I also there's a threat as well, and something that is affecting the news industry in a really big way. And that's that as these advancements are coming out, a lot of the platforms who are creating the technology are repurposing our work, other publishers' work, other creatives' work, and serving it within their environment and kind of diverting audience funnels. And that's extremely, extremely disruptive to the business model of news media, the business models, I should say, of news media, and it hits all types. So that's pretty worrying, and it tempers my optimism a bit. And that's why I say, at the Times, we know the risks and the risk to the model, given that this is happening. But we also see the opportunity for leveraging the tools and the technology like we've done many times in the past as the world has transformed to do, again, more journalism, get more information out there, get facts out there a whole lot faster than we were before. So I'm going to turn back. I'm going the wrong direction. Here we go. So I'm gonna get now into those case studies and turn back to a more optimistic note on that somber note about what's happening to the business models of news, and just get into how we're testing it in the newsroom. I can't talk about any of that without mentioning our principles for when we're using AI in the newsroom. I think the best way to put it is we're using AI to enhance, not replace, our journalists and our editorial standards. You are not going to see us publishing articles written and not edited just by AI on its own. We would never do that, and also that would be horribly irresponsible. You wouldn't get what you wanted to get, but we would never do that. We're seeing this as something, again, you blend the art, you blend the science. We're seeing this as something that amplifies our journalism by giving us a tool set to do more of it, and even in more effective ways. Okay, so I'm going to jump in. So one of the first ways that we're experimenting with AI right now is by creating pretty simple tools that allow us to get information, parse information, more information faster, and get it into journalists' hands for follow-up reporting. So one example, for the Senate confirmation hearings, we used AI to parse TV appearances and analyze the thumbnails to figure out when key figures were speaking. And this allowed our reporters to pinpoint the most consequential comments and statements for our coverage that day and for follow-up reporting later on. Of course, when we're using these tools to find moments in time that are, again, consequential and newsworthy, we have to fact-check the output pretty rigorously. It's an axiom in our newsroom that you should never trust an LLM. So before any output makes its way into a story, you have to go back to the original, the source material. But there's no doubt that it's dramatically speeding up the time to parse and understand information and get to stories that are important to tell the world. Same goes for beat reporting, which is really the backbone of the journalism of the Times. We are supporting beat reporters by creating new data sets, new tools that are helping them quickly absorb conversations across podcasts, videos, and areas of their coverage. So put simply, what we're doing is we're helping our reporters listen to the internet at scale. And this is something we couldn't do before the advancements in AI that we've all been talking about and following for the last couple of years. One quick case study, our Newsroom AI initiatives team, and by the way, this is a newly formed team in the last couple of years where we have a dedicated team who's working to figure out how to build these tools for the newsroom. So I'm speaking to their work. But this team developed a tool called Cheat Sheet that's incredibly simple and powerful. It gathers information across the internet, a lot of different sources, and then it enables our journalists to prompt to filter it and generate just searchable data that they can use for their reporting. Before it was a full-fledged tool, we had used it, for instance, to analyze over 500 hours of leaked video from an election interference group. And the AI transcribed the videos into text. There were 5 million words spoken in all of that video. That's a lot to process for a human. That wouldn't have been possible to do. I'm trying to do the math in my head for how many hours it would take to do that, but I actually can't. What it did is we gave the journalists the raw material to question and to seek. And these were two reporters who've been covering democracy and election threats collectively for more than 18 years. So we married their expertise combined with what AI could do to provide the information that they needed to do their jobs, and it was transformative. The tool leverages carefully crafted prompts guided by journalists' expertise to extract insights from big volumes of information, and then it structures it just to put it out there, what it's doing. And I imagine we'll do far more work like this. This is just, again, early in the experimentation process. Format expansion is another theme that we're diving into and where we're applying AI tools. We've used it, like many other organizations, to scale audio narration of our articles to make them more accessible to a wider audience, and also just to make our stories more convenient for the multitasking audience. The advancements in AI really shifted the quality of synthetic voice in the last couple of years. It's no longer robotic. We felt comfortable that it felt right for Times stories and could really capture the tone of our stories and our coverage. So you'll see that in far more places across our report. And in some circumstances, you still will hear just a reporter reading their story. We still do that too when it's important and for the right stories, but we would never be able to do that at scale. We already ask our reporters to do 1,000 things while they're trying to do their jobs reporting, and reading aloud would probably be a lot of time for them. So this was a great advancement, leveraging AI. And like I said, this one isn't unique to us. You're seeing this pretty broadly across the news industry. Another example, this one's one of my favorites, but that's because since I was in college, I was a New York Times commenter. And our reader community and our comment community is one of the best on the internet. And that reflects two things. It reflects the fact that we have some of the smartest readers in the world who are really thoughtful and can provide a lot of expertise and perspective on our stories, and they do. They're gold. But we also have a team of, over 10, and sometimes we dial it up, moderators who have been for years now going through those threads and reading those comments and making sure that we are moderated to be a good space and a safe space to have a conversation about news. But back in, a few years ago, and this was during 2020, and this is one of the teams that I oversee at the Times. There was a moment where I was really worried about the team moderating because of the influx of hateful comments coming through. It really felt uncomfortable and not right for them to be reading some of the things that they were reading. So that's when we started experimenting with just, practical applications of ML in order to automatically reject and make sure no one has to read the garbage that was making its way through. Seemed like a coordinated effort, by the way, if you're wondering. It felt a little anomalous. But then as we scaled that up and built, more tooling and opened more stories, the community just thrived and grew, and our reporters wanted to jump in and be part of it, and felt like it was more rewarding than jumping in on a Twitter or X conversation or in other threads off of our site where they're not moderated. So now we have a pretty active reporter community. And I think why I like this example is that a lot more people are going to be getting news from AI. I know that. But every reader that we've surveyed, or what we see is the human connection is really important for trust in news, which is really important for a democracy. And this is that direct human connection that we're providing, and I think that's that girds us against some of the threats of AI for diverting the audience funnel towards the platform. So I'm a big fan of this work, and you should watch this space because there's a lot more coming from the Times. If you subscribe, you'll notice. And then just one other example. We've been using AI to do, or using LLMs for a really good purpose, which is kind of getting a nuanced understanding of our stories, which is helping the advertisers that advertise with the Times make sure their message gets on the right stories. Back in the day, we did this through things like content tags. We have a lot of them. We tag a lot. It was originally designed to support libraries. But we were trying to repurpose those tags to help targeting, and LLMs just do it way better. So we launched a tool called Brand Match that's doing that. And it's really good at understanding a brand message and then connecting it to the right stories. It's pretty on the nose sometimes. You can see in the example on the right, it's really on the nose. So that's been a really effective use case. And for the data practitioners in the room, I'll just say, and you'll probably get this really quick, using LLMs to kind of describe and really understand all the kind of hidden subtext in a story, all the things that feel invisible to a reader. Wow, they mentioned 3 sources. AI can help us extract all of that invisible work behind stories and then really capture and describe it better. And I think that will unlock quite a lot in the future that goes way beyond advertising use cases. All right, so now I'm just going to speculate. So this is really reflecting my opinion right here on where I think the world is going with AI, and that I am particularly keen to figure out in the next week, because everything's moving really fast. First, I mentioned, right off the bat that we're seeing AI pretty dramatically impact consumer expectations, and I think consumer expectations around personalization will probably change the most. Most of the AI tools out there are pretty lovely when it comes to recognizing what you've asked before, the problems you've tried to solve before, the answers it has delivered to you before. I use about 3 different tools in my day-to-day life, and it's pretty, I'm actually starting to expect that everyone just knows what my interests are at this point, and knows what I don't really understand all that well at this point. And personalization in the news space has mostly been, up until this point, all about topical discovery. So most personalization algorithms that you see across the internet for news are based on Hannah likes tech, or birds. And it's serving you up stuff based on that past thing you did, or explicitly because you told it what you wanted to read. And I think that kind of personalization will still exist and be important, but I think contextual personalization is probably the next frontier for news organizations to solve. And what I mean by that is that I think personalization will look more like, hey, reader, you're about to go through a pretty complex topic or story on a Supreme Court development. You haven't read about that in the past. You've asked our own internal site search about this in the past. Let me give you an explanation before you get in the story. Or, hey, reader, you have a cousin that lives in California. there's wildfire very close to their house. That's what I mean by contextual personalization, and I see that demand or expectation growing pretty quick. And that then creates the need for something I mentioned earlier, having a better idea and of being able to pull out and make data of our stories a little bit differently, which LLMs are good at, so that they know, hey, this is an explanation, and we can serve up and respond to that personalization need very differently. And that, I think, will be true for transparency, too. One of the things about news, this comes up a lot for me. I get a lot of comments that are like, yeah, that story from the New York Times is the exact same story I saw from CNN and the Washington Post. And although they are on the same topic and offer some of the same nuggets, they don't see the double sourcing, the different standards of the Times, and oftentimes because we don't tell you, we might have broken the story, or the Wall Street Journal broke the story. But people don't really know that origin, and if they did, they would understand the value a lot more. And when I think ahead to a world where people are getting news through AI, it's so anonymized that I think this problem will be worse, and I do see it as a problem because people will value news less if they don't understand the work behind it enough to trust it. And I think everything I've talked about so far, we have an opportunity right now to make the invisible visible around journalism and news gathering, and I think that will be really important ahead for news in the AI world. We could be way more transparent. And by the way, that is one of the most critical trust drivers for news organizations. Transparency is one of the things that if people feel you're transparent, they will trust you a whole lot more. New surfaces and formats. I already mentioned audio, but with the proliferation of AI, seems very coupled with the proliferation of new services or surfaces for consumption. Glasses come to mind for me, which appear to be on the verge of becoming mass market. Audio has already become through home assistance, is now mass market. I think there's going to be a lot more of that, which means I see an opportunity to deliver news in more moments that are useful to users. And contextually, this person's doing X right now. We can deliver news in a way that makes sense for them and what they're doing right now. So I do expect a lot, we're going to rethink even more how we deliver news when somebody has interfaces in more places in their life. And I'm going to end on the other one. And it relates to audience again, but when I think of, right now, internet destination behavior, which is something we strive for, it's really important to me that I see audiences typing NewYorkTimes.com into their browser or opening our app. That is the best quality signal that somebody has a habit with us, someone's going to stick with us, that we have a reputation that's good. And when you're moving into a world like I just described, I'm going to have to define that destination behavior very differently. And I think that's going to look more like a branded prompt in the future, in addition to seeking out a destination that we will continue to create because direct relationships are important. But I think it's more important now than ever, and I think about this from the Times on a day-to-day basis, to become the instinctual mention when people want news, to be in an agentic world, to be the source that users ask for. I think that the future belongs in those that will succeed in the world are those that are learning how to create that behavior now. Again, because the funnels are changing, the surfaces are changing, and we still need to be really top of mind. So that was my last note, and I'd love to hear your questions.
We have plenty of time for questions, so I will help Hannah out by kind of moderating the things as we go here. Question here, yes. Oh yeah, there are a couple mics, mic runners here.
I don't want to leave out the people on the video. Is this going through? Is it
Yes.
through? Yes? Okay.
Yeah.
Thank you so much. This was fascinating, especially given that yesterday at the end of the day we had an AP person come in and speak. I don't know if you were there for that. What was the reaction at the New York Times to the 10 summer reading books that was generated by AI and many publications printed? It addresses one of your first comments, and it's interesting about the New York Times is saying we will not have AI write our content, we will verify it. So how does you respond to those media organizations who ended up in that situation where they did?
Yeah.
Like, what is the discussion in the news media profession about that kerfuffle?
Yeah, I mean, it was a great example of how, let's see, I'm trying to think of the best way to put it. I mean, everyone was pretty surprised, and if people don't know the story that was just referenced, there was another news organization that published a summer book reading list, but some of the titles on the book list recommendations did not exist, right? So they were the result of hallucination. The very thing that, or one of the many reasons, and the reasons go beyond a worry about that happening, why we wouldn't ever do that. Like, we would never just be like, yeah, sure, let's write an article with AI, because the hallucinations are real and they happen quite often. The response was more like, yeah, that is a good reinforcement of our principles for how we are going to do this, which is we are going to start with our journalist and expertise, but use tooling to amplify it and make it better. So that might look like we have a summer reading list tool. I might be wrong to suggest that AI guards this tool. I actually haven't talked to the books editor about it yet, and I have thoughts on it, so I will be doing that. But where we say, tell us what you're interested in reading, and we're going to bring you to a book. But we gathered the information on the book. We reviewed the books. We had a good sense of what the books were out and the quality before. Then we said, hey, AI, do the job, or technology. It might not be AI, but do the job of helping it connect with what this reader is looking for. So that would be our approach to it, but we're not going to be publishing articles unvetted by any AI tooling. I just could never see that happening.
Question over here, yes.
So this also kind of piggybacks off of the talk that we heard yesterday from the AP. So the project that they were discussing with us was looking at making an integrated LLM specifically for journalism, and really focusing on an archival database that can be referenced by journalists or by institutions. Do you see an LLM or a GPT like that being incorporated into New York Times eventually, or do you see that being like outside of your mission?
No, I can imagine the Times amassing its own data set. We have a vast archive as well, and using it to, train our own internal tools to answer things like a user search query on the New York Times differently and with more nuance. Again, you're not seeing that right now, because even if you train on your own high quality selected sources, you're still going to get hallucination. That's just if you're using a third party model. But I could see us doing that with our own work. We wouldn't do that. I could never see us, and I am just speaking from my own perspective here. This isn't a conversation I've had, so I just want to put that out there. I couldn't see us ever doing that with other publishers' content. Especially because we've felt so acutely the impact of third-party platforms aggregating our content and kind of serving it up, and you need permission to do that. And so only would we ever consider that with explicit permission, but we wouldn't do it kind of automatically. But with our own content, sure. And in one space we've done that, by the way, is we also have outside, the New York Times has a collection of brands. Our cooking product, we have this brand called Wirecutter, which does product recommendations, and we've definitely used it there in that space. News, we're being very conservative and a little bit slower for good reason, but we've already done that in one product of ours with some success.
Thank you.
Sure.
Question over there, yes.
My question, so a lot of times when you query an AI model, there's a parameter that you can set, I believe, called temperature, that says, if you set it at one end of the spectrum, it gives you just the facts, and at the other end of the spectrum, it allows it to be very creative. I wonder if there's some other, parameter that kind of talks about, political bias, right or left. A lot of times when I watch news, I will, what I call, listen to both news from the left and news for the right, and try to figure out what Republicans like and don't like about what's happening, what Democrats like and don't like, and I try to figure out, make my own opinion that the truth is somewhere in the middle. Is there any similar parameter that New York Times uses to either, for multiple different reasons, it could give feedback to the reporter to recognize their own political biases, or to intentionally target market people that want news for the right or news for the left?
Yeah, on the very last thing that you mentioned, kind of targeting news to the left or right, I can't see us ever doing that. We're aiming to serve all readers with kind of independent, this is the most important news for everyone, regardless of your political party. That would be, we wouldn't try to target specific political parties, because we think that the way to achieve our mission would be to really just serve up with objectivity and independence what we think the most important news for everyone in the country is, or everyone in the nation and the world is. So I can't see us doing that. There is an analogous thing we've done, but more just for the storytelling. So sometimes you'll see us do one-off things just for the sake of telling a story, and you'll see applications of AI in that. And in the past, in the opinion section, where you will find more where you're going to find people expressing their take, which you won't find in news. We've asked users to kind of plot what they found to be where they landed on a debate, who they thought, who won, or it basically was like who won the debate, who did the best at these things, and then I think we've used AI in that case to kind of assess the overall sentiment, but we ourselves didn't provide a dial to say where this landed politically. So this is me saying I don't think we'll offer that as I can't see the Times offering that as a filter, but it doesn't mean it's not something I'm going to want to study, in other ways and in other venues, but not in news delivery, because I am super curious about people's relationships to the news and their political affiliation, but that I don't think belongs in our report. Thank you for the question.
Yeah, question here.
First, thank you for a really great talk. Covered a huge amount of ground. The question I have is more on what you've been speculating about, in particular this area of personalization. Some of that really looked like what could also be transforming the way that we teach, right? I mean, in some ways, you're customizing the experience in such a way that the individual could be better at absorbing what it is that you're bringing to light. Have you thought about that connection, and have you reflected in some way on your own experience here at the University of Minnesota or broadly?
Yeah, it was funny when OpenAI released ChatGPT. The very first thing I did was pitch a column that leveraged AI to teach people math that thought they were bad at math. I thought it was going to be a real hit, by the way, because I thought most people think they aren't quantitative because they don't really relate to the examples used to teach. But here we go. We've got a tool that can personalize. Teach me this concept, but talk to me like, give me an example using my favorite hobby. Things like that. And so I saw it as being incredibly transformative. The only problem at the time that I pitched this is GPT and other AIs are really bad at math. So you never saw that from the Times. Reasoning, but there are reasoning models out there now. Maybe we can finally do that. But education was where I first went, because I thought this is so great and helpful to people who learn very differently, who are in a box with how they have to learn. And I also find it as I write, I think maybe, I don't know, I think I write like 50 prompts a day to like Gemini or Claude, and everyone's like, oh, doesn't that make you worried that you're gonna lose your own intellectual edge? And I just thought, no, this is saving me so much time, and nothing's in the way of, my flipping through questions and peeling the onion, and I feel more creative or smarter than ever. So I'm generally very optimistic about it. Yeah, I'm very optimistic about it, and I'll probably leave it at that. But I think it could be pretty explosive if incorporated correctly.
Yeah, question here.
It's really amazing what you're doing with AI. I think I'm convinced now I need to renew my subscription to New York Times.
Please do.
But just question, there are lots of the bad actors using the AI to generate the fake news videos. Yeah. I mean, you watch that when you don't know whether the person is talking or is real. Mm-hmm. Do you have any special process to kind of make sure you don't use those as a kind of the truth or?
Yeah, I'll speak to that very quickly, and it is a really big worry. I haven't read the story yet, but I heard that over the last few days, fake images have been spreading about the protests in LA. That's a problem. We definitely saw imagery, or we run into this all the time. People query the New York Times for misinfo all the time. That's how I know it's going viral, the misinfo. It's one of my best signals of something taking off. And so we think a lot about it. You'll never see the Times, I think, make the mistake of publishing what looks like a user-generated video on the scene, right? Because anytime you see us use aggregated video or video from the internet that puts us in, say, Gaza, we've called and vetted the source of that material, meaning we have spoken to the image creator and they have sent us visual evidence of their phone of when that photo was taken and a proof point to prove they are where they are. So we're particularly careful about any sort of aggregation of what you see across the internet. And a lot of people, I haven't seen this a lot from other news media. I see it more from influencers who just don't have the fact-checking apparatus and that we do, where they've really been duped. I am really, but I am thinking about this a lot. I don't know if, again, Google I/O, I keep mentioning it, and now I feel like I'm being a press person for Google, and that's like a nightmare for me. But they launched a new video making technology that is pretty stunning, and that has me pretty nervous that we're going to see this at like in a much higher volume soon.
There's a question up there in the back.
So this is to kind of jump off of almost what you answered already, but I was recently at a medical conference, and a lot of physicians identified that the more advanced the AIs are, the LLMs, and the more they're trained to increase accuracy, what actually happened is that they get better at basically, hiding misinformation or disinformation or incorrect statements within their responses. Mm-hmm. And I'm curious whether you guys have observed something like that, especially when you guys are potentially using it for fact checking, and I know that you do have a human layer in there, a human in the loop. But is that something that you guys have seen to be getting worse, or there's just more misinformation or disinformation in terms of what the AIs are spitting out on your end?
There are a couple of reporters I wish who were here to answer, because they might say they might be more privy and be able to answer you with more recent examples than I could. Have I witnessed this? Yes, but I have a very specific use case. We tested AI for language translation, and just to tell you the why. Yes, browsers and devices are going to automatically apply language translation, but there's other things that news organizations do. We program our homepage that shows editorial priority. We send out newsletters. We make social media posts, and you can't do that for people in other languages unless you have the thing yourself. So So we tested it because I would like more material to work with to reach international readers and readers in the United States who don't speak English as their first language. And the more I will just say, you didn't see us roll out multilingual sites because it didn't work out as well as I had hoped for, meaning when you used generative models, there was a lot of hallucination that seemed so confident. One of the best examples is in front of the AI would insert the words "the ambitious" in front of Nikki Haley's name. So it was trained on the internet. So, but we also saw that the more that we tried to fine tune for our purposes, that it didn't seem to get any better. It was more training, flat in terms of quality. And for us, it didn't quite reach the bar, but that doesn't mean it won't down the line, because I think at some point they'll get there. But it was changing meanings of sentences too. So it wasn't just hallucinating, it would change Russian expert to Russia expert. Those mean two totally different things, but it's like an easy translation mistake, right? And that it took a lot. It took too much editing on top of it to have it be considered productive. Anyway, that was a long way to say I've observed that personally because I was involved in the testing of those models. Some of our reporters probably are observing it more of what you say, but I just can't speak to that. Sure.
Yeah, question here in the middle. Okay, we'll start there.
I can be quick. You had the one slide on the cheat sheet, and my immediate thought was, I want to use that. Because it looked like it would be it would accelerate what you can learn about things.
Yeah.
I mean, that was the intent for your journalist, but it's like, I just wanted to comment that it's like, I want that.
I want to open source it, but I don't know if I'll. I do. It is a really useful tool, and I think it could be useful to every single person, not just a journalist. And I also hope people like. We often release those things. I don't know that we will, but I don't know that we will. I don't know that we can. But I do appreciate hearing that, and I'll probably tell the team, and then someone will probably yell at me for even just bringing that up in a public setting.
I am actually curious about this. I don't know if this is true, but I worked at the Times early in my career, and I remember people saying that like the early technology behind the fax machine and also LexisNexis came from the Times, and so there was a history of like developing really innovative technology and spinning it off. I think often not sort of commercializing it to its full potential. But is there any thought about using tools like that one or the moderation tool you showed as well? I can imagine a lot of applications external to the Times where there'd be value in commercializing products like that.
Well, one, I'll just respond to the first thing you said. And yes, the newsroom graphics department was always really scrappy and always went rogue and never asked permission to open source some of what they did. The data visualization language, D3, also came out of the New York Times, and they opened it up to the world. So yeah, I do, and I kind of love that. Back when I wanted to work at the Times, I was watching them do that, and I was like, I really need to be on that team. But I have no idea if we will be doing that, and I don't know if we can, because I'm sure, because we, in some cases, are using like third-party integrations, things like that would make them less probably usable unless you also were paying for an enterprise access. But I am going to go back with that question.
Yes, question here.
Yes, thank you.
Yeah.
I don't want to be the person that kind of takes us out of behind the scenes at the New York Times, but I am curious to know, from a healthcare perspective, the parallels you see between, through the lens of AI, but what do you see in healthcare and what you see in the newsroom, maybe even on like a deeper kind of on a data level itself?
Yeah, that's a great question. The Times, so I'll refer to our coverage or as a piece of data in this particular moment. And for us, we treat the quality and accuracy of it almost as if we're federally regulated, which we are not. We view that input as something that has to be fantastic, and that's why we've been really careful about how AI can train on it, how it reflects it back, because to us, the facts have to be facts. They have to be accurate. And I suspect in the health space, too, your data, in this case, clinical data, personal data, that the sample used to predict, infer, all of that relies on really quality sample and data sets that are not, biased, but I'm saying biased in a totally different meaning. And so I suspect that we share some commonality, or there's some continuity in just the way that we regard the quality of the input for future LLM development or training.
Thank you.
Question here.
Yeah, thank you for your talk and your insights. I'm really glad to hear your principles and boundaries it sounds like you have behind your use of machine learning at the time specifically. I know my partner is a copywriter, previous reporter as well, and obviously with everything happening both at the Times and just in general in journalism, I'm curious how you see the role or the work of reporters or other writing-based professions like copywriters changing?
That's a great question, and one thing that I think this statement will sort of say it all, but the New York Times newsroom keeps growing, and these technologies have now been around for a while. So that is to say, we don't see AI replacing the functions of reporting in any way. We're gathering the source material. I do think, or I suspect, that gathering the source material, knocking on the doors, telling the stories, having the curiosity to create a big data set with cheat sheet and know what to ask of it, that's going to become more and more important. The curious really are going to make out well, I actually think, because they will go far and use the tooling to go a lot farther. In terms of the editing, I'll just admit, I'm using it for word editing myself, especially on the most diplomatically delicate emails I need to write, or text messages. Got it. It's really good, and I imagine that field will be disrupted, but I don't think that it'll go away. I think the meaning, like it was somebody with a copy editing background that noticed the Russia expert example. Do you know? It was somebody who has scrutinized words and their meaning and had high standards for those that was able to, show me what the problem was. So I don't see it going away, but I do see a lot of people being able to do more basic editing, but the real guts, the real editing, the more meaningful one about meaning, I don't think can go away, and I don't think that meaning element can be replaced by AI.
Thank you.
Sure. These are great questions.
How about way up there in the back?
Thank you so much for presenting so many AI usage. My question is, are there any forbidden areas or red lines within New York Times regarding AI usage? Also, for these AI use cases, what's your disclosure policy? What use you need to disclose to the public?
Yeah, and one thing I'll just mention, just in case I miss something or I get it wrong, we've published our principles around AI and our disclosure standards on our website, and it's really easy to find. I was actually looking it up, so I know it's Googleable and it ranks well. Yeah, there are definitely some places we won't go, which I'd mentioned. Like, you're not going to see stories be published that were entirely conceived of or written by AI. I don't think this is written in a standard, but I don't see editors prompting AI for what should I assign my reporter either. That that I would assume would be, I can't imagine any of our editors actually ever doing that. Imagery, for instance, won't be, we don't edit a lot of our images because it could change in the reality of what we have photographic evidence of. Do you know what I mean? So there are things we just won't edit or touch, but when we do use it in a way that is pretty meaningful to the story, we disclose it. I wish I could remember the headline on the story, but our visual investigations team has used AI to scan, and again at great scale, satellite imagery to find out movements in different war zones. And that is disclosed within the story what the technology was used to do. So I think you should I think two things. Like I said, I would reference kind of what we've documented because it's capturing it better than I am doing right now. But just know that if it's used substantially, you're going to know it as a reader because we're going to be upfront about it.
Thank you so much. I'm just curious, when ChatGPT happened, you guys have some internal trainings for your employees, how to use them?
Yeah, we do. We, in order to access the tools that are available to the newsroom, you do have to go through training on how to use them to avoid mistakes, how to, all the things you need to know. And we're really careful about what data we put into certain tools because we don't want to, for instance, I would never put an AP story into an external AI because then I'm inviting that platform to train on their news, their original journalism, and I wouldn't do that. So that's the kind of guidance also that we give anyone before they can access the tool. I will say, I think a lot of people are going with their personal Gmails and signing up and probably trying things out but not for work. So.
Yeah, back row.
Yeah, I've got a question about the personalizing the news and using AI to do that. We've seen with social media where they sort of hyper-personalize feeds that it can quickly become an echo chamber for people. They see what they want to see. So sort of a dual-faceted question, how do you plan on preventing that if you plan to hyper-personalize the news? And how do you plan on protecting all of that additional personal data that you would have to collect in order to hyper-personalize the news?
That's a great question. I'll answer with just a bit of a description of how we handle personalization right now to avoid that. Although I'll say, we publish about 140 stories a day, it would be hard through personalization given most people have the budget to read 10, if that. I think they wouldn't be able to fall into a bubble reading the Times right now, but let me just tell you how we handle it. And again, the theme gets at kind of using our editorial tools and blending that with our data tools. So there are places on the Times homepage right now that have a personalized component. There's a module called In Case You Missed It that's sometimes there. There are places lower on the page where you and maybe a family member or friend are seeing a different collection of stories. But what we do there is those are all selected. That personalization is happening across a series of articles that have been selected by editors to make available for personalization. And this is important because if you were to just go topical personalization on New York Times, the algorithm wouldn't know that this news is no longer timely, don't serve it up. It would not really produce the best result, to be honest, but also we guard against other issues by making sure that the algorithms are working on things that we feel are very, very important based on our editorial perspective. Now, I can't imagine us veering from that. And when I mentioned contextual personalization, and I think I told you that section of the presentation was more like my speculation. We're not necessarily doing this right now, but I'm very interested in it. When I think contextual personalization, it's not about just like giving you only the topics you want. It's about getting at that mission that I mentioned that the Times has to help people understand the world. And it's really about understanding like, this reader does not have a background in this topic, and let's quickly bring them up to speed, that sort of thing, rather than saying this person does not want to know what's going on with the tariffs, because we're going to show everyone that, we're going to show every reader whether or not they want that or not, because we feel like it's really important for them to see.
Yes, question there.
So this is a question I think that we've been beating around the bush around a little bit, is data provenance. Do you see an emergence at some point of a standard around data provenance, especially with the proliferation of synthetic data?
Yeah, I mean, that would be, I hope so. I don't see it. I hope so. Like I said, I think, but I also, and this is where I think the users will demand it, even if no one comes in and says you have to do it. And they'll also demand it if we start showing it more and we get them excited about it. Meaning, I really think users are going to want to know where stuff came from and won't be satisfied with a little link at the top or a footnote in a long summary. My experience with the Times is that you might have noticed we have a lot more video of reporters telling their stories. Readers want to see they don't just want to see the provenance of the information, they want to see the who behind it and the why behind it as well, which is why one of the reasons why we're doing that. It's an input to why we're doing that.
Yeah, I think it's in a general sense, the video is going to be easier to watermark and discover. But the other side of that is the liability side for enforcement. Do you see a trail back to liability suits and the lack of data provenance or being able to break the data provenance?
Yeah, I feel like a dummy when I'm answering this one, but so I'm not like, let me just say that I'm not speaking for the Times, but I love this question because I was thinking about it with Google AI mode and some of these answers that unlike social media posts, the platform there is protected by Section 230, but I don't know what the world means when somebody's giving someone deep research that might lead to a negative consequence if misinfo is presented, but that is, you clearly are smarter on the legal topics than I am, but it is something I'm thinking about, but I'm not speaking on behalf of anyone when I give those answers. That's just me speculating out loud in public.
I think we have time for maybe one or two more questions. Oh, whoa. Yeah.
Questions, but this has been a great conversation, and it has given some light to the question that I had at the very beginning, which I was hoping to hear, and that is the title Chief Data Officer is relatively new. Are you the first Chief Data Officer? First question. Second part of that is, can you give us a sense of sort of what the ratio of concerns, broadly speaking, are? When we think about this at a university, for example, a chief data officer is very likely going to be spending a huge amount of their time in privacy issues, yet you're also talking about tool development, which is something you seem to be passionate about. And so just a glimpse maybe into, the history of the CDO at the New York Times, and then how you're spending your time and how you're seeing that evolution of time change as the landscape changes.
That's such a good question. I'm the first chief data officer for the Times. Like, I'm the first person to hold that title there. We've certainly had really strong data leaders in the past. My predecessor, in particular, was one of the best data people out there. And I often say when I talk about this or get asked questions about being chief data officer, or I often say when I'm talking about it, I say I'm kind of a weirdly shaped one. I'm not a former engineer running a huge technical infrastructure around data. I inform the tools we need, but I'm far more of a data storyteller for the Times. And again, that's where I'm bridging both worlds, and probably why they put me in seat, because while I was in the newsroom doing audience work, I was using data to tell the story of what was shaping the business and making a lot of recommendations. I'm an opinionated CDO. So it's very different. I feel like I'm leading the questions that the Times is asking about its data and how to wield them. And I also oversee consumer-facing ML applications in the ML science team, of course, but the insights piece of it and the data piece of it is really big and important for the Times. And so I put most of my focus less on the tech stack, where we have people, doing a really good job transforming that and needs to transform more, but just to keep up with the external environment we're in. But I spend a whole lot more time saying, how can I get to the first order question? What questions at the time is still nagging at every executive, and how can I like look at the world a little bit differently or visualize the data a little bit differently to get them over the hump and make a decision. And I would also say probably unlike, and this is like a product of taking a newsroom employee and putting them on in the business side job, data visualization is like so important to me. And the data visualizations coming out of my insights organization have to exceed or match the quality of the graphics team in the newsroom. The data has to really tell a story through great visualization. So I hire at a quality where I have to fight with the newsroom about taking some of my team and pulling them into the graphics desk, which I haven't totally guarded against. It's happened. The jerks. But those are like kind of, I think like I said, sometimes I go to chief data officer roundtables and all that. I'm kind of like, I'm the weirdo at the table. And it's partly spanning both those worlds. But I do want to say something. I do like the tech part of it too. It's just that I think the reason why I'm in my seat is about the questions, less whether or not I can transform a data set robustly and save costs. And our lawyers, we've got a great privacy lawyer who also hold my hand a lot and take the lead in telling me about what's going on in that space.
Well, I think that's a great place to end the session. I want to please everyone give a round of applause to Hannah Poferl for joining us today. Thank you so much.
Great questions. Thank you, everyone. Thank you.
And I think we have a coffee break now until the next session.